Is the Wagner Group finally running out of gas in Bakhmut? And what is Russia's plans for the future? And maybe we might even get some insight into Ukraine's counteroffensive. I'm Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran. It's March 10th, 2023. This is your daily Ukraine update. Let's get into it. Okay, when we look at the control map, you can see the largest change is that Russian forces have taken Dubo-Vasilivka. This is, again, well to the north of Bakhmut and probably part of a Russian effort to continue to push into and encircle the city. They've probably realized at this point that they hold the entirety of the area east of the Bakhmutka, but it's going to be so hard for Russian forces to effect a crossing. This is because, of course, the need would be for like a pontoon or other bridging capabilities, and Ukraine is going to be watching this river like a hawk with their drones. So there's almost no way for Russian forces to cross en masse through this river, especially not given that their ground infantry are primarily low-skill conscripts and former inmates. So instead, what they are probably trying to do is focusing on encircling the city of Bakhmut, trying to go around their problems, basically. Meanwhile, Ukraine, of course, continuing to hold these two crucial lines in an effort to keep these roadways open to effect their withdrawal from the city to, again, prevent their forces from being encircled. So it's all not clear how it may be a benefit to Ukraine, right? Since as long as they have forces on call, so to speak, and they have a minimum amount of forces watching the Bakhmutka, they won't have to keep this entire line of contact manned. Instead, they can take the forces that were fighting along the east of the river and redistribute them along the north and south axes, hopefully giving them some additional manpower to help kind of stabilize these lines and ensure that there's some breathing room to allow these two roadways to remain clear. Even if they don't necessarily, they should withdraw. I've been saying that for a while. If for some reason they feel like they can hold out longer, you still need these two roadways open, right, to supply troops continuing the fight in and around Bakhmut. But what's interesting is that according to the Institute for the Study of War, in addition to a massive missile strike that included everything from Iranian drones all the way to hypersonic Kinzhal and S-300 missiles, the Wagner Group's offensive is apparently, allegedly, entering a temporary tactical pause. So 3 days ago is when Russian forces were officially listed as having captured everything east of the Bakhmutka, and there hasn't been any real reported attacks from them since. As we talked about, they just don't have the capacity to conduct a river crossing. Those are hard military operations. And it probably burned a lot of their troops to achieve the gains that they have. But the Ukrainians' eastern grouping forces, their spokesperson had said that as of March 9th, an increasing number of unspecified Russian airborne and mechanized reinforcements have recently arrived in Bakhmut. Increased Russian conventional forces may suggest that Russian forces want to offset the possibility that Wagner is exhausted and still be able to push in Bakhmut. Russia also, of course, as I have been talking about for a while, may continue to work in Volodar simply because the Eastern Military District Commander has been ordered allegedly to take Volodar at any cost to silence widespread criticism of the Russian MOD about its lack of progress and significant casualties in Volodar. This is, of course, classic Russian thinking where symbolic wins supersede real battlefield wins. And the worse an idea is, the more important it is that that idea is brought to fruition, just to prove a point about your own power. As we can see, Volodar has the lines have been utterly locked in place for days. And so Russia allocating its forces into two really attritional losing battles, Volodar and Bakhmut. Bakhmut, they are winning. Like Russian forces, no doubt, they're winning in Bakhmut. At what cost remains to be seen. But here's where things are at their most interesting. When we look over at, and see if we can find it. Oh, it's actually Warmapper's Twitter account. Let me pull it up real quick. On Warmapper's Twitter account, there's a little aside of from the daily update that Ukrainian forces have advanced back into Mayorsk, a settlement now listed as contested. And as you can see here, it's not a significant part of the front. It's actually right at the seam between this DNR and LNR, south of Klachivka. And when we look at the combat map, we can see that it is right here. This is Mayorska, which I think is what they're talking about. And there's Bakhmut. Here's Donetsk. So, and then here is Mayorsk. It looks like the end point of a significant railhead, a small town, and an intersection between two roads. But when we look at, so your first thought is maybe this is the start of the offensive. Certainly the timing is about right. Russian forces, right, have just reinforced Bakhmut. They've just committed their reserve force to Bakhmut. And to apply pressure on Mayorsk, right, would it's not a totally illogical place. You can see Russian fighting concentrated to the north and to the south. But the catch is there's a lot of Russian units here, like a lot. And while they're in Bakhmut, they're only a few miles from Mayorsk. So they could literally be there in hours. Especially given that Russia has what we used to call interior lines of control. This is the idea that Russia, right, you can see literally how Russia would, if it needed to switch forces from Bakhmut to Mayorsk, it would just take them probably down this MO3 highway and then take them right into Mayorsk. It would be a 30, 40 kilometer drive, maybe, something you could do in an hour. Whereas, Ukraine would have to like loop its forces out and around. It's easier for Russia to navigate inside its own forces. The other reason this doesn't make any sense to me as a place to launch your offensive, look at the terrain. As you've seen in Bakhmut, it is hard to take a city. It is really hard to take a city block by block. And it's much easier to just encircle those cities and bypass them. But look at how hard it would be to do this urban area here. I mean, just look at it. It's an absolute urban sprawl. It would be so hard to take this city here. Horlivka just looks like incredibly spread out. There's no way Ukrainian forces could encircle this. If they pushed hard down this road, they're going to leave all of these potential Russian forces sneaking in their backfield. This is just an absolute nightmare of a location to try to conduct an offensive operation. It seems like just a really terrible idea. And when we zoom out, again, it's between the two largest concentrations of Russian forces who are here and here. To get to the Russian border would require looks like several, maybe 100 miles, maybe a little more. And all of that with Russian forces 100 miles in your backfield. It just seems like an absolute disaster. So while it's good that Russian forces are or Ukrainian forces are counterattacking, I think in all likelihood, it's just to seize control of this railhead and deny it to Russian forces. Because as you guys can see, if they could use this railhead and this road intersection as a major thoroughfare, right, to push troops and supplies into southern Bakhmut. So I think that's more likely what we're seeing here is just that Ukrainian forces pressuring a major rail hub and roadway hub in order to deny it to Russian forces. Anyway, guys, that's all I had for you. Of course, today we are dropping a new Patreon video. Thanks so much to my lieutenant and colonel tier patrons. You guys are the ones who make this whole thing possible. We're going to update this today to reflect all the new colonel tiers, all the new lieutenant tiers. And I appreciate the support from each and every one of you guys, and I will see you in the next one.